So, Philosophy Tube is actually an old adversary of mine. Not much has really changed in his sophistry apart from the fact that his production value has increased by a considerable amount. However, he still is as terrible at arguing and being honorable in philosophical discussions as he was in the past. So, here we are again doing another video response to Philosophy Tube, and it's been years since I've taken a crack at this guy, but it hasn't really gotten much better. Production value is great, but his arguments, not so much. And you guys will see with my incredibly low budget video response as to just how silly it is. Now, his original video was 40 minutes long, and most of it, or at least the later half of it, has a lot to do with Ben Shapiro, and I don't really give too much of a fuck about defending Ben Shapiro. I will have to defend him in so facto, but this video response isn't really mostly me defending Ben Shapiro, but more me taking a crack at his arguments against Ben Shapiro when it comes to abortion. So I find that his arguments to be incredibly irrelevant, if not just poor in general, especially the analogy that he'll bring up in the second part of this video response. So the first video response is only going to be tackling the first, I would say, about a good 5 to 10 minutes of his video, and the second one will conquer the other 10 minutes of the next one. Because the later half of it is him just kind of responding to Ben Shapiro, and like I just said, I don't really care. So, we're only going to be focusing on abortion. Now, the reason why this video made me rather upset the first time I took a crack at it was because his sophistry was just so absurdly laughable, and people actually thought that this was like good argumentation that I was just floored. But I'm a lot calmer now, and I'm pretty sure I can tackle this. One pretty well. So he'll finally take us away.
In recent months, various states in the US have voted to criminalise abortion, and in Northern Ireland, one of the 4 countries that make up the UK, it's been criminal since 1861. I assumed, wrongly, that the pro-life position was always a religious one.
Now, this point alone reveals his remarkable degrees of ignorance. Number one, you don't really need to invoke the creator of the universe to say that people, specifically women, shouldn't be killing their fetuses in the womb before they even have an opportunity to be. But more importantly than that, it really goes to show the depths of his ignorance as to why so many people have an issue with abortion, and that would also include lots of women too. I mean, granted, it is only women solely making the decision to kill their fetuses, which is why I am incredibly blunt about what is going on there. But to be fair, there are lots of women who are against abortion, so it isn't really fair to say that, there aren't any women that don't find this shit to be incredibly abhorrent. But, more to the point, my friends, you don't need to invoke the creator of the universe to say that it's wrong for a woman to kill her children. And I will argue the rest of my points as if I were an atheist, and I do not believe that there is a creator of the universe. So, assuming that I am indeed an atheist, all of the points that I will be making will have nothing to do with God, and you guys will see it's not even difficult, honestly, to argue against it. Continue.
Because one of its chief supporters is purveyor of high-camp, mild-mannered, evil Pope Francis the Only. But Ben Shapiro showed me the truth. Although he is religious, he doesn't support his position on abortion with religion. And for me, that's more interesting. If somebody says they want to criminalise abortion because God says so, then they'd have to prove that God exists, prove he does say that, and explain why the government should listen to God when he spends most of the year living in a tax haven.
Which, by the way, no one says that. People want to criminalize abortion because they think it is the murdering of a human life. Or, at the very least, the killing of a human life, if you want to be pedantic. Which, I mean, that's kind of the long and short of it. Because it isn't anything but a human, considering the fact that it is a product of 2 humans. Which is ironclad. There's no real counter-argument against that one. The real counter-argument is arguing that it's okay for women to decide to kill those children, and I don't think that it is. But arguing whether or not it's a living organism is just foolishness on account of the fact that it, 1, requires energy, and 2, it grows. So, I mean, that alone. Again, you don't need the creator of the universe to come to that conclusion.
I know Ben is frustrated by people coming to him saying, if you're pro-life, why do you support the death penalty? Or wars? Or why were you the bad guy in the Hunger Games film?
Well, to be clear, there is a very reasonable explanation, whether you agree or disagree with it. One, an unborn fetus has done nothing to warrant death apart from be unwanted. But someone who's being executed has gone through a trial, has been tried and found guilty. And if there's a war, there stands to reason, usually not always, I mean, not every war is righteous, if any, really. It does stand to reason that if there's a war, one side is trying to actively kill the other, and thus it is mostly self-defense. However, there is no, usually, I mean, unless the pregnancy is a danger to the mother, killing a fetus because you don't want it is not the same as killing someone that's trying to kill you, nor is it the same as punishing someone who's done something wrong. This isn't me saying that I am a fan of capital punishment, and this is also isn't me saying that I'm a fan of warfare. However, those are not the same thing.
And I think I can help by being just a little more precise. Ben is pro-state-forced pregnancy.
Now this is where I'm going to have to ipso facto defend Ben Shapiro. I don't think Ben Shapiro is for state-forced pregnancy. Unless by state-forced pregnancy you mean the state is forcing women to not be able to kill their own children, then I guess technically that would be the case. However, I understand what this sophistry is for. The sophistry isn't really to accurately define Ben Shapiro's position. It's to paint Ben Shapiro as some kind of anti-woman hater, and it's to prey upon people's instincts to protect women or to respect lay women's feelings and their rights to such an unnatural degree as to where they will cast out the very reason why we actually have this desire to protect women, which instinctually it's because they carry children. So ironically, it's kind of strange that we are fighting for the right to kill their children when them having children is what makes them special in the first place. Anyhow, I digress. The point is, no, one, the state, if I'm being pedantic, is a force that cannot impregnate anyone. Men impregnate women, so the state cannot enforce any pregnancy. But to be more to the point, which I'm just being cheeky here, I know what you mean. You mean that he's for the state not allowing women to have abortions. I guess technically that would be the case, but you'd have to argue that it's wrong for the state to enforce anything, and considering the fact that the state enforces lots of things, and women aren't particularly special in that regard of being enforced or compelled to do something by the state. Being drafted in taxes and being forced to pay for insurance you probably don't want, and the state kind of enforces, I don't know, lots of different fucking laws, because that's kind of what it's for. Women are actually special when being enforced to do anything. And even if the state does enforce women to remain pregnant, honestly, it wouldn't be beyond the power of the state, considering the fact it compels us to pay taxes. The state compels us to do lots of things. Unless you're going to argue that it's wrong for the state to enforce anything, well, you really don't have much of a basis here to enforce that it's wrong for the state to enforce pregnancies. But considering the fact that the state cannot force a woman to become pregnant by its very nature, considering it's a force of government and not a person, and considering the fact that most pregnancies are consensual, or so far as the sex that occurs in the pregnancies are consensual, usually, unless we're talking about rape, but we'll talk about that some other time, it's not really fair to say that his position is for state-enforced pregnancies as much as it's for not killing children before they even get a chance to be, which is really what Ben Shapiro's position is. It's just kind of ipso facto, it would mean that the state has enforced women to remain pregnant because it's not allowing them to kill their children in their wombs. So,
if somebody is pregnant, he thinks it is okay for the government to make them stay pregnant unless being pregnant is medically going to kill them.
Now, let's say that that is his position, which it kind of is, only so far as he doesn't think that people should kill women should abort their children. You're going to actually have to argue that it's wrong for the state to enforce that. And honestly, I don't think that it is. But to be fair, I also don't think that the state should have to enforce something as simple as not killing your children before they even get to be born. Or killing them at all, now that I think about it.
Ben says adult humans obviously have a right to life, and then he points to fetuses and says, look, at X number of weeks, you've got a heartbeat, fingers, toes, They're human. Even at early stages, when fetuses lack some of the things that grown humans have, they usually develop those things. So if we can't draw a certain line between right to life and no right to life, we should act as if there is no line.
Well, considering the fact that at every stage of its existence, from the time it gets fertilized, it's a living organism, considering the fact that it, one, requires energy, and two, continues to grow and develop, then the line is pretty crystal clear. It's a living organism. You have to argue that it's okay to kill that living organism for X reason, but there's no argument as to whether or not it's a living organism. I don't see how you could logically conclude that it isn't, just based on the criteria of what it means to be alive. I mean, sure, it may not have consciousness, but there's a fucking plant.
For those on the pro-choice left, maybe we can see why we sometimes fail to persuade, because those who support state-forced pregnancy have conceived a very different kind of argument. If you believe that life begins at conception, and that life is morally fully equivalent to a grown person, it must be a little distressing to know that abortions go on. Ben certainly seems very upset by it. And if you believe as he believes, then I'm afraid I've got more bad news. Fertility clinics, where people go if they can't have babies, delicately extract eggs from human follicles using a needle guided by ultrasound. And then they extract spermatozoa, that's the scientific word for jizz, through a complex medical procedure known as wanking. Or if you're a bit put off at the idea of busting a nut in a hospital, you can use one of these $6,000 sperm extraction machines. That'll put you at ease. Oh yes, sexy. They combine eggs and sperm in a lab and implant the resulting embryo in someone's womb so it can grow and they can have a baby. When sperm meets egg, that's what we call conception. But they always make more than they need, so they've got spares, and they discard all the embryos they don't use. So if you believe that human life begins at conception, then I'm sorry to have to tell you that fertility clinics the world over discard several million more lives annually than you maybe even realized.
And that would be tragic. But it would also be, dare I say, irrelevant, because sperm clinics or fertility clinics discarding fertilized eggs is not the same as a woman choosing to kill a fetus that has begun to develop. It's just not.
And I'm afraid the bad news continues. Even amongst people who get pregnant the old-fashioned way, by holding hands with your wife and doing a special hug, a huge number of fertilized eggs don't implant in the wall of the uterus and are passed out. Estimates vary between about 1/3 and 2/3, but let's take the lower end. If you believe that life begins at conception, then you might want to sit down, because that means that approximately 1/3 of all people die within a week of being created.
Yeah, that's sad, but I'll do you up one. About 100% of all humans created die at some point in time, because that's what happens. You see, my friend, there's a total difference between someone or something dying that's out of our control versus someone or something dying because you decided you didn't want it. I'm not really even sure if I need to explain it, but I will explain it just for those of y'all who don't understand this concept. Let's take it like this. If someone dies in a car crash, or someone dies from obtaining a sickness, which would be a little bit more accurate to the whole not being able to control nature, we as human beings can't really control it. Even though we have all these different kind of vaccines and whatnot, I mean, it's still... We still can't really control it, you know. Look at HIV and all different manners of disease we have no cures for. The long and short of it is, earthquakes, tornadoes, when bad things happen to us that are outside of our control as humans, we do not call that murder. We don't even consider it to be evil or even cruel. It's just a fact of life. And dying from old age is similar. I mean, no one did anything to it. It's just happened. Your body breaks down because it's just not immortal. And it would be the same thing as a bunch of fertilized eggs passing through a vagina or being flushed out of a vagina, even if because it failed to implant or it didn't. It doesn't really matter because that's just nature. Everything is going to die at some point, and we can't control whether or not this egg cell or this fertilized egg is going to implant or not. In the same way we can't control floods or tornadoes or all earthquakes or whatever that kills people or sickness or whatever. We can't do that. But someone deciding, after they realize they've been pregnant for a couple of weeks, that they don't want to have a child and they choose to kill them is totally different. And that is wholly a difference between someone dying and committing murder. It's someone choosing to kill another person or another living thing. And murder is just the unlawful killing of something. So let's just say it's not murder technically because it's not unlawful, but it is killing something and it's choosing to killing something. And that is wholly the difference. Not just because we're talking about different stages in the development of a human being, but we're talking about one happening outside of our control and the other fully, completely within the conscious decision and control of a woman deciding to allow the procedure to happen that will kill her child. My friend, you're not talking about the same thing. There's two different things.
Maybe you didn't know that. Several American lawmakers have been caught out not knowing even basic stuff about what pregnancy and abortion actually involve, and that must be a little embarrassing if you support their cause. Maybe you did know it. But if you support criminalizing abortion on the grounds that life begins at conception, and you're not also thinking about fertility clinics or research to increase embryo implantation rates, maybe get a little bit curious about that.
I mean, curious or not, people can be totally 100% against fertility clinics specifically for that reason. In fact, the two ideas are not contradictory towards each other at all. And considering the fact that one of them is totally irrelevant as to why someone would be against abortion, well, I know I keep throwing my hands up, but seriously, dude, like, the two ideas are not related to each other. And I have no idea why anyone even kind of thinks that this is good argumentation. One, abortion, is considering or choosing to kill your child because you don't want it. And even if you kill your child because it has some kind of threat to your health or it might kill you, I mean, that would be a little different, but it's still a choice. You're still choosing to do so. And the other stuff, we're not choosing to do so. Unless fertility clinics, they are choosing to discard lots of fertilized egg cells. So that'd be a little different. That is a bit cruel in my personal opinion, but I'll argue that in the comment section. I won't bog you guys down with it.
Maybe you can see why some people suspect you of just wanting to control women.
Well, considering the fact that the government just wants to control people in general, women aren't actually special in that regard. And honestly, if we have to control women's desire to kill their own children, I think we have something else we need to talk about. Again, I'm just saying, I know for a fact all women aren't for abortion, but I mean, dude, if your argument is you're just trying to control women because you don't want them to kill their children, well, I think you need a better argument or a better point to be made because, one, the government controls all of us and compels us all to do something, so women aren't special there. But two, women shouldn't really have a desire to kill their children out of convenience in the first place, so that in and of itself is kind of a problem. But, I mean, you guys don't want to talk about that.
It's not so much a comment on your conscious intentions as an explanation of why the focus seems to be on abortion rather than all fertilized eggs.
No, my friend. It's because you are, dare I say, somewhat ignorant. It's because you don't recognize that we're talking about two completely different things. One argument is talking about whether or not you should have the choice to kill your own children before they even get to be born. The other things you're referring to is whether or not these different things that we can't even control or even look at are living organisms or not. Which they are living organisms. And it's entirely possible to be consistent in not wanting to have millions of fertilized eggs killed. But either way it goes, the reason why this conversation is not phrased upon trying to control women is because specifically pro-lifers are talking about it's not okay to kill a child or to kill any living organism that will become a human if it isn't already, which I don't know what else it would be, out of convenience. I don't really know what's so confusing about that apart from the fact that maybe you don't have a counter-argument to that.
But anyway, we're assuming for the sake of argument that life does in fact begin at conception. Ben says nobody's ever drawn that line between right to kill and no right to kill, and he's frustrated that people dodge that. So I'll confess, I don't think there is a fact to the matter. I don't think drawing a line even makes sense. The philosophical discussion of when somebody becomes a person with full moral rights is absolutely fascinating. But I'm afraid it's also completely irrelevant.
I'll just leave that one where it is. With that being said, we will conclude the first part So I'm going to immediately start working on the second part, because I know I'm really bad at finishing two-part videos. But with that being said, I just hope you guys got something out of today's video. And if you did, man, go ahead and click the like button. And shoot, go and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. And as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.